Picture this. A tiny figure standing on a jagged cliff. Wind so violent it tears the breath right out of your lungs. Ice-cold waves crashing below. Nothing but ocean in every direction, gray, endless, merciless ocean. She is alone. Not lost. Not stranded by accident. Abandoned. Left here on purpose, by someone who was supposed to protect her. Someone who shared her blood. She has no boat. No way to signal for help. No guarantee anyone will ever come back. The year is 1542. The place is a remote, uninhabited island in the North Atlantic, so desolate, so brutal, that sailors who passed it called it cursed. A place where the wind never stops screaming. Where the cold doesn't just chill you, it hunts you. And she has been left here to die. But here's the thing that makes this story almost impossible to believe: she doesn't die. Not quickly, anyway. What this woman endures over the next 4 years will push the limits of human survival so far that when she finally returns to civilization, people refuse to believe her story. They think she is making it up. Because no one could survive what she survived. So who was she? What did she do that was so terrible she was sentenced to die alone on an island in the middle of nowhere? And how on earth did she make it out? Stay with me. Because this is one of the most extraordinary true stories you will ever hear. To understand how Marguerite de la Roque ended up on that island, you need to understand the world she came from. Marguerite was a French noblewoman. Young, educated, well-connected. She came from a family of rank and privilege in 16th century France, the kind of family that had servants, wore fine clothes, and attended royal functions. She was not a warrior. She was not a sailor. She was not trained to survive anything harder than a cold winter inside a stone castle. But in 1542, her cousin, a powerful man named Jean-François de Roberval, was appointed by King Francis I of France to lead a major expedition to the New World. Canada. The vast, uncharted wilderness across the Atlantic. Roberval was ambitious, ruthless, and deeply conscious of his reputation. He had the king's trust and the king's money. This voyage was his moment of glory. And for reasons that historians still debate, he brought Marguerite along. Maybe he had a duty to her as her guardian. Maybe she requested to go. Maybe it was just convenient. Whatever the reason, Marguerite de la Roque boarded one of Roberval's ships and set sail into the North Atlantic. That decision would change everything. Because somewhere on that long ocean voyage, weeks at sea, rocking through storms, surrounded by soldiers and sailors, Marguerite fell in love. His name is not recorded in most historical accounts. History has not been kind enough to remember him. He was likely a young soldier or gentleman aboard the ship. Someone below her social station. Someone Roberval would have considered completely inappropriate. Forbidden. But love doesn't ask for permission. And by the time Roberval found out, it was already too late. When Jean-François de Roberval discovered what was happening between his cousin and this young man, he didn't just get angry. He became cold. Calculated. The kind of fury that doesn't scream, it plans. Think about what this meant to him. He was a nobleman commanding a royal expedition. His reputation was everything. His honor. His family's name. And here was Marguerite, his ward, carrying on a secret relationship with a man beneath her status aboard his own ship. In the social codes of 16th century France, this was not just an embarrassment. It was a scandal. A stain on the family name that could follow Roberval all the way back to the French court. He had to act. And he had to act decisively. Some historical accounts suggest he gave Marguerite a chance to end the relationship. She refused. She would not give this man up. Not even for her own safety. And that refusal, that single act of defiance, is what sealed her fate. Roberval made his decision. He would not drag the scandal back to France. He would not let it poison his expedition. Instead, he would remove the problem entirely, he would leave her behind. Not in Canada, where the expedition was headed. Not somewhere she might find help or shelter. No. He chose an island. A specific, deliberate, isolated island. A place so remote that rescue would be almost impossible. A place that would serve as both punishment and, in all likelihood, a slow death sentence. Historians believe he chose an island off the coast of what is now Newfoundland or possibly the Strait of Belle Isle region, an island in the cold, unforgiving North Atlantic. An island with no settlements, no resources, no mercy. But Roberval wasn't entirely without conscience, or perhaps he simply wanted to avoid the guilt of outright murder. He allowed 2 others to stay with Marguerite. Her lover, who refused to abandon her. And her maid, an older woman who had served Marguerite loyally. They were given minimal supplies. A few weapons. Some basic tools. And then the ships sailed away. Stand on that shore for a moment. Just imagine it. You watch the sails disappear over the horizon. The sound of the ships, the creaking wood, the shouted commands, the last sounds of human civilization, fades away. And then there is nothing. Just wind. Just waves. Just the brutal, indifferent sound of an island that has never cared whether anyone lives or dies on it. The island was unlike anything Marguerite had ever seen in France. It was rocky and raw, swept by Atlantic gales that seemed to have no end. The trees, what few there were twisted and hunched, permanently bent by decades of relentless wind, as if even the trees were trying to escape. The coastline was jagged rock, slick with spray. The interior was dense brush, uneven ground, and the kind of silence that feels less like peace and more like a held breath. There were animals. Bears, by some accounts. Wolves. Creatures that had never learned to fear humans because no humans had ever lived here long enough to teach them. And the cold. Even in summer, the North Atlantic air carried a bite. When autumn came, that bite became a fist. When winter arrived, the island transformed into something out of a nightmare, howling storms that lasted for days, temperatures that could kill an unprotected person in hours, snow that buried everything. Marguerite stood on this island with 2 people she loved, a handful of tools, and a future that looked almost impossible. But right now, at least, she was not alone. That was about to change. The first months were brutal but survivable. 3 people working together could do more than 1 person alone. They built a rough shelter, crude, nothing like the stone homes Marguerite had known, but enough to block the worst of the wind. They gathered what food they could. They hunted. But the island was cruel in ways that went beyond weather and hunger. Her lover, the man she had defied her cousin for, the man she had chosen over her own safety, fell ill. The records do not tell us exactly what took him. Perhaps it was infection from a wound. Perhaps it was disease. Perhaps the cold had already weakened him too deeply to recover. In the brutal, resource-bare conditions of that island, even a small injury could become fatal. Even a mild illness had nowhere to go but worse. He fought it. And Marguerite fought alongside him, trying to care for him with nothing, no medicine, no doctors, no tools of healing that a noblewoman of her time would have known how to use properly. Just her hands and her will and whatever scraps of knowledge she had. It wasn't enough. He died. The exact timeline varies in historical accounts, but it was not long after the abandonment. Months, perhaps. Maybe less. He was buried on the island by the 2 women left behind. Marguerite grieved. But she had no time to collapse. Because her maid was already failing too. The older woman, loyal until the end, who had chosen to stay when she could perhaps have pleaded for a place back on the ships, did not have the physical resilience to withstand what the island demanded. The cold. The hunger. The unrelenting hardship. She had given everything she had, but the island was asking for more than she possessed. She died not long after the young man. And just like that, Marguerite de la Roque was completely alone. No companions. No one to share the work or the fear or the silence. No one to remind her that she was still a person, still connected to the human world. Just her. On a barren, windswept island in the North Atlantic. With winter coming. What she did next is almost beyond comprehension. She did not give up. That is the first and most remarkable thing she could have. She had every reason to. 2 people she loved were dead. She was alone in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth, thousands of miles from home, with no realistic expectation of rescue. Any rational calculation of her odds said, lie down. Stop fighting. Let the island finish what Roberval started. She didn't. Instead, she worked. She improved the shelter, reinforcing it, making it tighter against the wind, layering insulation wherever she could find it. She had weapons, a harquebus, an early type of firearm, by some historical accounts, and she learned to use them. She hunted. Birds, mostly. Whatever animals she could find and kill. She learned which parts of the island offered the most shelter and which were death traps in a storm. She learned the rhythms of the place, when the worst weather came, where the animals went, how to read the sky. This was not a woman with survival training. This was a French noblewoman from a privileged family who had presumably spent most of her life indoors, in fine clothes, surrounded by servants. And now she was hunting alone on a subarctic island to keep herself alive. Every single day was a problem to be solved. Every day was a negotiation with the island. Give me food. Give me warmth. Let me survive one more night. And every day, remarkably, the island said yes. But the winters were something else entirely. The first winter nearly broke her. There is no other way to say it. The North Atlantic winter on a small, exposed island is not merely unpleasant. It is savage. Storms rolling off the ocean with the force of something that feels intentional, something that feels personal. Winds that rattle the bones of even a well-built structure. Snow that comes sideways. Ice that covers everything, the rocks, the wood, the ground, and makes every step a gamble. Marguerite had built the best shelter she could. But she was alone in it, and alone means something specific in that kind of cold. There was no one to share body heat. No one to take a watch while she slept. No one to notice if she didn't wake up. The loneliness, historians suggest, may have been the worst part. Not the cold. Not the hunger. The silence. The absolute, crushing silence of being the only human being for miles in every direction. No voices. No footsteps. No laughter. Nothing to remind you that the world you came from still exists. There were nights, surely, when she sat in that dark shelter and heard only the wind and wondered what the point was. She had no way of knowing if anyone would ever come. She had no way of knowing if Roberval had told anyone where she was, or if he had simply let the world forget her. She had to find reasons to keep going. Some accounts suggest she turned to faith. That prayer became a lifeline, not just spiritual comfort, but a daily ritual that gave structure to the shapeless, endless days. Something to do when there was nothing to do. Something to say when there was no one to talk to. She got through that first winter. Then the second. By the third winter, something had shifted. Not in the island was exactly as brutal as it had always been. The shift was in her. She had become something the girl who stepped off Roberval's ship could never have imagined. She knew this island now. Not just its geography, its moods. She knew where the bears were likely to be. She knew which spots were sheltered from which winds. She knew how to read the clouds 3 hours before a storm arrived. She knew how to preserve meat in the cold, how to mend her own clothing, how to keep the shelter from collapsing under heavy snow. She had built a life. Not a comfortable life. Not a life anyone would choose. But a life. A functioning, deliberate, daily life on a rock in the middle of the North Atlantic. Her hands were no longer the hands of a noblewoman. They were calloused and scarred and strong. Her body, once dressed in fine French fabrics, was now wrapped in animal skins she had prepared herself. She moved through the island with the confidence of someone who understood it, not conqueror, but something close to equal. She had survived things that would have killed most trained soldiers. She had done it alone. She had done it without ever being rescued, without ever having help arrive. She had simply decided, over and over again, every single day, that she was going to live. And she was going to keep deciding that until something changed. Something was about to change. In the summer of her 4th year on the island, a fishing vessel passed close enough to see smoke. Breton fishermen, working the rich waters of the North Atlantic, as they did every year, in their tough wooden boats. These were men who knew these waters well. Men who weren't easily surprised. But a column of smoke rising from an island known to be uninhabited, that got their attention. They didn't sail away. They came closer. They may have been cautious. Islands could hide dangerous things. But the smoke was steady, deliberate. Someone was sending a signal. Someone was alive. They landed. And they found her. What they saw when they stepped ashore is difficult to imagine. A woman. Alone. Dressed in animal skins, lean and weathered, with eyes that had seen 4 years of uninterrupted survival. Standing on the island that had been meant to kill her. Still standing. The fishermen could barely believe what they were looking at. Marguerite de la Roque had been on that island for approximately 2 years by some accounts, and closer to 4 by others. The historical record is not perfectly precise. But whichever number is correct, it was long. Too long. Long enough that the world had almost certainly given up on her. Long enough that she had almost certainly given up on rescue. She boarded that fishing vessel and left the island behind. She returned to France. And here's where the story takes one final, extraordinary turn. Because when Marguerite came back and told people what had happened, what Roberval had done, and what she had endured, and how she had survived, many people did not believe her. The story was too extreme. Too impossible. A noblewoman? Alone on an island for years? Hunting bears? Surviving Arctic winters in a shelter she built with her own hands? It couldn't be true. But it was. And slowly, the story spread. It reached the ears of Queen Marguerite of Navarre, one of the most influential literary figures in France at the time. The Queen was so stunned by the account that she included it in her famous collection of stories called the Heptameron, preserving Marguerite's survival for history. Roberval, for his part, faced little official punishment. Power protected him, as it so often does. He returned from his expedition, continued his career, and the world largely moved on. But the woman he left to die on that island, she lived. She outlasted the punishment. She outlasted the shame he tried to bury her in. She came back. And nearly 500 years later, we are still telling her story. Think about what Marguerite de la Roque actually did. Not in romantic terms, not as a legend, but practically, specifically, what she did. She was abandoned in a hostile environment with minimal resources. She watched the people she loved die one by one. She was completely alone for years. She had every reason to stop fighting and zero certainty that fighting would even work. And she chose, every single day, to survive anyway. There is something in that choice that goes beyond courage, beyond stubbornness, beyond even the will to live. It is something harder to name. A refusal. A refusal to let the island, or the cold, or the isolation, or the man who put her there define what she was capable of. The punishment was meant to erase her. Instead, it revealed her. And that, maybe, is the most human thing about this story. Not that she survived the island, but that the island, for all its cruelty and all its power, could not survive her.